For centuries, the Crathar had ruled the galaxy with fear. They were warlords, conquerors, and hunters. Every species that crossed their path had two choices: submit or be destroyed. The Crathar were not just another warrior race. They were born for battle. Their thick, armored hides made them nearly indestructible. Their claws could tear through steel. Their sharp minds made them master tacticians. No army had ever defeated them. And so, the Crathar believed they were the deadliest species in the galaxy. They had never been proven wrong. Not yet. The fall of another world. The planet Vesranine had once been a thriving colony of the Velari, a peaceful, insectoid race. But when the Crathar warships arrived, the Velari surrendered within hours. They knew resistance was useless. It always was. From orbit, Commander Korak watched the surrender unfold on his command screen. The Velari had lined up outside their cities, bowing their heads, waiting for the Crathar to take control. Fear was carved into their very movements. Korak smiled, his sharp teeth gleaming under the dim red lights of his warship. Another victory. Another world added to the Empire. Pathetic, he growled, turning away from the screen. Is there no one in this galaxy who can fight? The bridge officers remained silent. No one questioned Korak, because he was right. The Crathar had won every war they had ever fought. No enemy had ever stood a chance. And so, Korak and his warriors continued their conquest, world after world, always victorious, always unchallenged. But that was about to change. A new name in the stars. Several cycles later, a scout ship brought troubling news. A new species had been discovered. The name was strange. Humans. Korak frowned as he read the report. This new species had recently expanded beyond their homeworld, colonizing nearby systems. Their technology was advanced, but not extraordinary. Their weapons were powerful, but nothing the Crathar hadn't seen before. On paper, the humans were just another species waiting to be conquered. Yet something about the report made Korak pause. Unlike the Velari, unlike the others before them, the humans had a reputation for fighting. The report spoke of wars between their own people, conflicts that lasted centuries. Battles where humans had refused to surrender, even when they were outnumbered, even when they had nothing left to fight with. Korak's claws tapped against his command chair. It didn't matter. No species, no matter how stubborn, could stand against the might of the Crathar. With a flick of his wrist, Korak gave the order. The war fleet would move toward human space. They would crush this so-called warrior species like they had crushed every other before them. He would show the humans what true predators looked like. The first encounter. A Crathar attack fleet arrived at the edge of human space, scanning for weaknesses. They targeted Outpost TH7, a small human colony on a distant planet. It was meant to be a simple attack, a warning to humanity. But when the Crathar ships fired upon the colony, the humans fired back. Not with desperate last attempts, not with fear, but with strategy, with force. The Crathar were used to enemies running. But these humans, they stood their ground. They countered, they adapted, they fought like nothing the Crathar had ever seen. Within hours, the mighty Crathar fleet suffered its first unexpected loss. Korak received the battle report in silence. He read every detail. He studied the footage of human pilots maneuvering their ships with impossible skill, of soldiers using tactics no prey species should understand. A slow, predatory grin spread across his face. For the first time in his life, he had found an enemy worth fighting. The galaxy's deadliest predators had just met their worst nightmare. And the real war was about to begin. The Crathar had expected fear. They had expected the humans to run, to beg, to surrender. Instead, they fought like demons. Commander Korak stood on the bridge of his warship, watching the battle unfold. The human defenses at Outpost TH7 should have crumbled within minutes. Instead, the Crathar attack fleet was struggling. His warriors were not prepared for this, a battle unlike any other. Human warships were smaller than Crathar cruisers, but they moved with terrifying speed. They weaved between Crathar formations, dodging plasma fire with precision. "Commander, the humans are targeting our engines," a bridge officer growled. Korak narrowed his eyes. No species had ever fought like this. Prey should scatter. Prey should panic. But the humans, they were attacking like predators. Korak turned to his weapons officer. "Focus fire on their command ship. Destroy it." Plasma cannons roared to life, unleashing devastating blasts toward the human fleet. One enemy frigate was torn apart instantly. Another barely managed to evade destruction. But the humans didn't retreat. They retaliated. Their weapons were smaller but precise. Their railguns punched through Crathar shields, targeting weak points, learning, adapting. And then something happened that had never occurred in Crathar history. A Crathar warship exploded. Not a scout, not a damaged vessel. A fully armed battleship, destroyed by human hands. For the first time, the unchallenged predators of the galaxy tasted defeat. A warrior's rage. The bridge was silent as Korak watched the wreckage drift through space. This was impossible. But he could not deny the truth. The humans had fought them to a standstill. His warriors were shaken. They had never known failure. Korak clenched his claws, then let out a deep, guttural laugh. Finally, he murmured, "A species worthy of war." His officers turned to him in shock. They expected him to be furious. Instead, Korak's eyes burned with something else. Excitement. For too long, the Crathar had fought weaklings. Conquering had become boring. But humans had fire. They had rage. They had the will to fight, no matter the odds. And that meant only one thing. The real war was just beginning. Korak turned to his second-in-command. "Prepare the fleet. We are taking this fight to their homeworld, Earth." The hunt was on. The Crathar had never faced an enemy like this before. The battle at Outpost TH7 had shaken them. Humans had not only resisted but fought with terrifying skill. Instead of crumbling, they had countered. Instead of retreating, they had stood their ground. And now, the war had truly begun. The invasion of Earth's colonies. Korak was not a fool. One battle did not decide a war. The humans had won a single engagement, but the Crathar Empire stretched across hundreds of star systems. Their true strength had yet to be unleashed. So Korak devised a new plan. Instead of attacking Earth directly, he ordered his fleets to strike the human colonies first. The Crathar descended upon Mars, expecting an easy victory. But they were wrong. Mars fights back. The Crathar fleet entered Mars orbit with full confidence. Their warships hovered like dark shadows over the red planet, ready to strike. But before they could fire a single shot, human defenses activated. Railgun batteries, orbital missile platforms, stealth fighters. Mars had seen what happened at TH7. They had prepared. The first wave of Crathar ships never made it to the surface. Their shields shattered under the relentless assault. One by one, Crathar warships fell. Korak watched in fury. His species had always been the hunters. But now, the humans were hunting them. "Send in the ground troops," he snarled. If space belonged to the humans, then the Crathar would take the fight to the ground. A new kind of warfare. Crathar warriors were born for battle. Their brutal hand-to-hand combat, superior strength, and natural armor made them unstoppable in close quarters. They had expected human soldiers to be weak, slow, afraid. They expected a slaughter. Instead, they met hell. Human soldiers were not prey. They were tacticians, survivors, and killers. The Crathar were stronger, but strength was not enough. Humans used cover. Humans set traps. Humans fought as one, adapting, coordinating, and most terrifying of all, humans never gave up. For every human that fell, 10 more took their place. They did not retreat. They did not surrender. They fought until their last breath. The Crathar had never faced an enemy willing to die just to take them down. Korak's warriors, the most feared soldiers in the galaxy, were being slaughtered. The first true defeat. By the time the battle ended, Mars ill stood. The Crathar had lost. A full invasion force, defeated by humans. Korak had underestimated them. The entire empire had. As he stood on the bridge of his warship, watching his crippled fleet retreat, he clenched his claws. For the first time in history, the Crathar Empire had tasted true defeat. But Korak was not beaten. If humanity wanted war, then war they would have. And this time, he would not hold back. The Crathar had believed themselves invincible. They had never known fear, never tasted true defeat. But Mars had changed everything. Now, the humans were no longer just another species to conquer. They were a threat. And they were about to prove it. The counterattack begins. The Crathar fleet limped back from Mars, their pride wounded. Korak knew his people would not accept this loss. The Empire demanded victory. But before the Crathar could launch another attack, the humans struck first. They did something no species had ever dared to do. They invaded Crathar space. The first target was Drakrath 2, a heavily fortified supply world. The Crathar believed it was impenetrable. No enemy had ever even attempted an assault. Yet, in the darkness of space, human ships arrived. And they didn't come for diplomacy. The art of war. The Crathar fought with brute force. They crushed their enemies through overwhelming power. Humans. They fought with strategy, with intelligence, with ruthlessness. Instead of a direct assault, human forces disabled the planetary defenses from orbit. Stealth bombers crippled supply lines. Cyber attacks shut down security systems. And then, when the planet was at its weakest, the human soldiers came. They didn't fight in open fields like the Crathar expected. Instead, they used hit-and-run tactics, ambushes, urban warfare. They attacked supply depots, command centers, power stations. The Crathar were stronger. But what good was strength when your weapons had no power, when your food supplies were gone, when your reinforcements never arrived? The mighty Crathar warriors were starved, cut off, outmaneuvered. Within a week, Drakrath 2 fell. For the first time in history, the Crathar lost a world to an enemy attack. And the humans didn't stop there. Terror in the Empire. News of the defeat spread across the Crathar Empire like wildfire. For the first time, Crathar citizens felt fear. They had always believed they were the galaxy's ultimate predators. But now, whispers filled the streets. The humans are coming. World after world, the humans struck with precision. They didn't need to conquer. They only needed to weaken. And it was working. Korak watched in fury as the reports came in. His people were panicking. The humans had turned the war into a psychological battle. They weren't just attacking the Empire. They were breaking it. And the worst part, they were enjoying it. The hunter becomes the hunted. Korak slammed his fist against the war table. The humans had proven themselves dangerous. Too dangerous. This was no longer a war of conquest. This was a war for survival. The Crathar could not afford to let humanity grow stronger. If they did, one day, the humans would burn the entire empire to the ground. Korak knew what had to be done. The humans had to be exterminated. Every last one of them. And so, the Crathar made a fateful decision. They gathered their forces. They prepared their deadliest weapons. They set their sights on Earth. This time, there would be no mercy. The Crathar had underestimated humanity for too long. Mars had resisted. Drakrath 2 had fallen. And now, the humans were striking deep into the Empire. The mighty Crathar, once feared across the stars, were on the defensive. Korak had had enough. If the humans wanted war, they would get war. And so, the full force of the Crathar Empire was unleashed upon Earth. The fleet that darkened the stars. The invasion fleet was the largest in Crathar history. Thousands of warships, battlecruisers, and troop carriers moved through space like a storm of death. No other species had ever warranted such a response. But the Crathar had learned their lesson. They would not take chances with humans. Earth would burn. Korak stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching as the blue planet came into view. Begin the bombardment. Hellfire from the skies. Across the planet, sirens wailed. The people of Earth had known this day would come. They had prepared, but no amount of preparation could stop what was coming. The first wave of orbital strikes ripped through Earth's defenses. Space stations were destroyed. Military satellites were wiped out. Cities trembled as shockwaves from kinetic bombardments shattered skyscrapers. Millions died in the first hour. It should have been over. Any other species would have surrendered. But humans, they fought back. The last stand of humanity. As the Crathar landed, they expected desperation. They expected chaos. Instead, they found hell. Every street became a war zone. Every building was a fortress. Civilians did not run. They fought. Old men with rifles. Women with homemade explosives. Teenagers hacking into Crathar communication lines. Every human became a soldier. And Earth itself was their weapon. The price of war. Korak watched the chaos unfold. His warriors were dying by the thousands. The humans were relentless. Their weapons were primitive compared to Crathar technology, but it didn't matter. They set traps in the ruins. They launched coordinated ambushes. They sacrificed themselves just to take more Crathar down. Korak had never seen such madness, but it was working. The mighty invasion force, the greatest the Crathar had ever assembled, was stalling. And then something impossible happened. The humans counterattacked. The turning point. From hidden underground bunkers, humanity unleashed its final weapon. They called it Project Ragnarok. Experimental railguns punched through Crathar warships in orbit. EMP missiles shut down enemy communications. Cyber warfare crippled their command structure. And then came the special forces. Elite human strike teams infiltrated Crathar command centers, assassinating officers, sabotaging supply lines. Even Korak himself was nearly killed by a human sniper. The Crathar had come to wipe out humanity. Instead, they were the ones being slaughtered. Korak finally understood the truth. The humans were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for revenge. And they would never stop. The invasion of Earth had failed. The Crathar had made the greatest mistake in their history. And now, they would pay the price. The Crathar Empire was on the brink of collapse. Once the most powerful military force in the galaxy, they were now a broken shadow of their former selves. The humans had torn through their defenses, driven them off Earth, and forced them into a retreat unlike anything Korak had ever imagined. And it wasn't just Earth. Across the galaxy, the humans' counterattacks had spread. Now, the Crathar Empire was in flames, a desperate escape. Korak stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring out into the void of space. The once proud fleet was a shadow of what it had been. Entire squadrons had been wiped out in the battle for Earth. The remaining ships were limping home, battered and broken. The Crathar had failed. Korak clenched his fists, teeth grinding. The humans had taught his people a brutal truth. There were no guaranteed victories. Even the mightiest could fall. But he would not let it end like this. Prepare the evacuation. Korak's voice was low but firm. We will regroup. The fight is not over yet. Humanity's pursuit. The humans, though battered, were relentless. They did not stop with Earth. They followed the Crathar into every system, chasing them down one by one. Human forces struck with precision and relentlessness. The Crathar couldn't keep up. Human ships, now better armed, faster, and more organized, tracked down every Crathar fleet in their path. Every Crathar world that had been lost was followed by another defeat. It was no longer just a fight for Earth. Now, the entire Crathar Empire was at risk of annihilation. The final battle. Korak knew time was running out. His forces were spread thin. Earth had been the beginning, but humans were now everywhere. Desperation clawed at him. The galaxy's most feared species had been bested by a race of hunters they had once looked down on. But the Crathar would not go down without a fight. Korak gathered his remaining fleet. They would make their stand at Zartal, the final stronghold of the Crathar Empire. If they failed here, there would be no empire to retreat to. The humans, led by General Alexis Harper, were closing in fast. They had learned the Crathar's every move. They had studied their tactics, their technology, their weaknesses. And now the Crathar were going to face their final test. The destruction of Zartal. Zartal was a massive, well-fortified world. It had been the heart of the Crathar Empire's military strength for centuries. Korak's forces launched everything they had. But the humans were ready. The final battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Human warships, led by Harper's flagship, tore through the Crathar lines with brutal efficiency. The humans had developed new weapons, pulse disruptors that disabled Crathar shields, and stealth bombers that penetrated the strongest defenses. On the ground, the Crathar were overwhelmed. Human soldiers fought with unmatched intensity. They didn't care about numbers or size. They fought like warriors who had nothing left to lose. Korak watched as his flagship, the pride of the Crathar fleet, was torn apart by human railguns. His warriors fell around him, their once mighty battle cries silenced forever. In the distance, he could see Zartal burning. The humans had won. The last hope. Korak, bloodied and battered, knew it was over. There was no empire left. No future for the Crathar. The humans had broken them. As the last Crathar warship was destroyed, Korak's thoughts turned to his people. The once great Crathar Empire was no more. The humans had taken everything. But there was one thing Korak could still control. He activated the self-destruct sequence on his flagship. The Crathar would die with honor. The aftermath. When the dust settled, the Crathar Empire was no more. The humans had not only beaten them in battle, they had destroyed their entire way of life. Korak's name would be forgotten. The Crathar's legacy would be reduced to a warning. And across the galaxy, one thing was clear. The humans were no longer just survivors. They were the dominant species. And for the first time in the galaxy's history, the hunters had become the hunted. With the destruction of the Crathar Empire, the galaxy was left in shock. The once feared species was gone, its empire reduced to ash. The galaxy would never be the same, but neither would humanity. They had been on the brink of extinction just a few years ago. Now, they stood at the top of the food chain. But the victory came at a cost. A reborn humanity. In the aftermath of the Crathar's fall, humanity took a moment to breathe. They had won, but at what price? The war had cost them millions of lives. Planets were shattered. Cities burned. The Earth itself had been scared by the invasion. Yet, through it all, humanity had endured. General Alexis Harper stood before the United Earth Assembly, gazing out over the council. She could feel the weight of their victory. The Crathar were gone. But the galaxy was not a peaceful place. New threats would rise. Old alliances would be tested. And humanity had to be ready. We did not just survive. We fought. We conquered. We will rebuild. And we will never be weak again, she declared. The crowd erupted in applause. A new alliance. The defeat of the Crathar left a power vacuum. The galaxy's other species, some of whom had once feared the Crathar, were now faced with a new reality. The humans were no longer a species to be underestimated. And so, new alliances were formed. Humanity began forging bonds with species that had once been reluctant to cooperate. Together, they would rebuild the galaxy and ensure that something like the Crathar invasion would never happen again. The Galactic Council expanded to include human representatives, their voices now carrying the weight of a rising empire. But not all species were willing to accept the new balance of power. Some feared the humans' growing influence. And so, The political games began. The human legacy. As humanity expanded across the stars, the story of their victory over the Crathar became a legend. It was the story of the underdog, a species that had been pushed to the brink of extinction, only to rise up and crush their tormentors. The humans' bravery, determination, and unity were now written into every historical record. Their actions had reshaped the galaxy. But even as they celebrated their triumph, humanity's leaders knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and new challenges would arise. Threats would always exist, but humanity had learned something important. They were no longer just survivors. They were conquerors. A new war. While the Crathar were no longer a threat, humanity's rise to power did not go unnoticed. Some species in the galaxy, bitter and jealous, began to view humans as a new threat. They feared what would happen if humans decided to expand even further, conquer more systems, and bend the galaxy to their will. And while humanity stood united in victory, there were those who whispered that the galaxy had grown more dangerous than ever. Would humanity remain a force for peace, or would they become the new conquerors of the galaxy? As tensions simmered, General Harper and the leaders of Earth began to ask themselves, what would the future hold for humanity? The war with the Crathar was over, but the battle for the galaxy had only just begun. A world transformed. Back on Earth, in the ruins of the old cities, signs of reconstruction were everywhere. The scars of war were still fresh, but humanity was determined to rebuild. New cities were rising, and humanity's infrastructure was being revamped with advanced technology. It was a new beginning, and with it came new opportunities. The humans, having proven their strength, now faced the challenge of creating a society that could ensure their survival in a galaxy full of dangers. They had to remember one thing. The galaxy was vast, and humanity was just one piece of it. But that was a piece that would no longer be ignored. The legacy of the Crathar. As the dust settled, and the galaxy moved into a new era, the Crathar became a cautionary tale. Their ambition, their arrogance, and their failure to see humanity's potential were the reasons for their downfall. Now, the Crathar's empty thrones sat cold and abandoned. Their cities crumbled. The galaxy had moved on. But the story of humanity's victory would echo across the stars forever. The humans had risen, and nothing would ever be the same.